With the critical success of Coralie Fargeau's The Substance, there has been increased attention towards the way the female body has been perceived and portrayed by the media. This renewed interest has given rise to further conversations on gendered and cultural expectations of beauty, not just in Western media, but also in East Asia, specifically Japan. Fargeau's film captures a part of the social issue, however, it is not the first to do so. Many other films prior to The Substance have touched on the exploitation of pressure put against women in the fashion and entertainment industry. One film in particular is Mika Ninagawa's 2012 film, Helter, Skelter. Her film revolves around Liliko, a Japanese model who undergoes a full-body cosmetic surgery in the hopes of rising in the ranks of the modeling industry. However, over time, her skin starts to break down as a side effect of all of the operations as she descends into madness. Ninagawa's film captures a unique perspective on how these societal pressures manifest in a morbid and brutal way, as well as how these expectations are created and perpetuated. Now, in order to understand how this came about in Japanese pop culture, it is important to acknowledge the historical context behind Japanese beauty perceptions. Ninagawa's film was actually a live-action adaptation of Kyoko Okazaki's manga of the same name. It is important to note that mangas, specifically shoujo mangas at the time, which were a category of Japanese comics that were aimed towards adolescent girls and young female adults, were predominantly written and illustrated by male artists during the 1950s and early 1960s. However, it slowly grew in popularity for female artists after the 1970s. Since then, countless stories have been written and drawn by women, centering female perspectives on adolescent topics, primarily dating and relationships. What has been argued by scholars is that because of this focus on women and female stories, it can provide a space that, quotes, empowers female readers by giving them a voice in a patriarchal society that silences women, end quote. What is special about Helter Skelter, specifically, is that Okazaki had worked as a fashion illustrator prior to illustrating mangas. Because of this, she utilizes her experiences in the industry in her story to highlight the limitations and dangers caused by the demands placed on women involved in this line of work. Additionally, Ninagawa, prior to directing the film, had and still has a prominent photography career in the fashion and advertising sector. Because of these two backgrounds, the film's premise is heavily derived from real, authentic experiences in its respective industry. To start, Liliko, the film's protagonist, provides a unique depiction of the heavy pressures placed on female models. Her character is first introduced completely wrapped in bandages after her surgery. This shocking introduction shows the complete transformation she put herself through in order to obtain the perfect body for modeling. When it turns out that the surgery she underwent was illegal and that her new skin was rapidly decaying, she turns to getting even more plastic surgery in order to fix her dying body. In the operating table scene, we see how this surgery is not only extremely intrusive, but also physically painful for Liliko. The film focuses on her facial expressions, displaying not only the fear, but also the regret she possesses when undergoing the surgery. She of course could have left her body alone, but her incessant desire to possess a youthful, flawless body pressures her to harm her current body through these unnatural modifications and procedures. This is reminiscent of the way plastic surgery has become increasingly prevalent for young women, even outside of the modeling world today, especially in East Asian countries such as South Korea and Japan. The beauty industry in these countries have glorified images of, quote, unrealistic visual models of ultra-slim, sexualized, and cosmetically enhanced women, end quote, creating warped perceptions for many youths, all in the hopes of selling more treatment and products to young girls. Liliko's character embodies these desires and pressures to look perfect, of course, at the peril of natural skin. In addition to the tragedy of Liliko's story, her interactions with other female characters also show another side of the beauty industry. When Kozu, a new model, comes into the picture, one who is marketed for her natural beauty, it directly interferes with Liliko's desire to be the current top modeling candidate. This only escalates Liliko's descent into madness, as she turns into the film's villain. Liliko had already been treating the people around her poorly, including her assistant, but she starts to act even more unhinged, seducing her assistant's boyfriend, sabotaging her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend by having her assistant throw acid in her face, and attempting to murder Kozu, her rival model. She not only transforms into an anti-hero, but also a female predator through these horrific actions. Her modeling agent, Tada, also embodies the misogynistic expectations that are placed on young women, having been the one to convince Liliko to undergo the illegal surgeries, and also perpetuate the idea that Liliko has to remain perfectly beautiful in order to have a purpose in her life. Both of these characters represent how many women not only internalize but also weaponize these gendered expectations of beauty, thereby creating a cycle of constant self-objectification. It is also of no coincidence that Lilico refers to Tada as Mama throughout the film, showing the power dynamic and influence that older women have on younger women in the industry. The film continues to show these pressures through its urban setting. It depicts Tokyo as an overconsumptive society, flashing shots of colorful magazine advertisements, fashion boutique stores, and a shot of young girls excitedly discussing who the next top model will be. These show a world that revolves around constant consumerism through products and media, feeding into Lilico's and other models' desires to stay at the top through any means necessary. Lilico depends on this kind of consumption to continue in order for her popularity to stay afloat, but the fast-pacedness of the industry as depicted through its fast cutting and sped-up shots show that Lilico never would have been able to keep up. She is just seen as an object to the industry, who is easily dumped by and turned against when a newer model comes into the scene. Not only is she exploited by her modeling agency when they coerce her to undergo harmful surgeries, but she is also corrupted by it, as seen in her mental breakdowns and villainous actions. The brutality of the industry is further expressed through other cinematic choices, such as sound. The camera shutter motif is used throughout the film to not only show the constant pressures of being under the gaze of society by both men and women, but also evokes a sense of unease and anxiety. The sound of the cameras are loud and constant and almost creates a dizzying effect after multiple continuous shots of it. The sound becomes unescapable to not only Lilico, but also the viewer, as it seems to be both in the beginning, middle, and end of the film. At the end, when Lilico has finally had enough, she stabs herself in the eye at a press conference in front of a room full of reporters and paparazzi. Her action can be seen as her final awakening to the horrors of the fashion industry, relieving herself of both the internal gaze and self-objectification she had placed on herself and other women throughout the film. During this scene, for a brief moment, the camera shutters stop and there is an eerie silence. To Lilico, the silence is a sense of peace, but to the audience, it could produce the feeling of shock. Unfortunately, after a few seconds of silence, the camera shutters start up again and return to the same volume as if nothing had happened. Although Lilico is freed from her own internalization that was brought on from the industry, it still continues to objectify and exploit her image. The film's ending displays a somewhat pessimistic view of the fashion industry, showing that it is an unstoppable force and will only continue to harm and impose impossible gendered expectations on young women, as long as there is a market for it. The best thing to do is for people to break away from the system themselves, but as seen in Lilico's tragic story, most people have already been taken advantage of by its standards and demands, and to completely leave it usually comes at a much higher cost. Ninagawa's film shows how the fashion industry exploits and corrupts women through the gendered expectations it creates and places on them. It aligns with works of other feminist scholars such as Naomi Wolf, who have argued that, quote, beauty is not only socially constructed but also premised on misogyny, end quote. We see how these pressures come from highly unrealistic standards of beauty, all based on selling more products in a capitalist system. Although it leaves viewers with a bitter view on the industry, it brings awareness to this societal issue and greater reflection on how we view women within it.